Adam Weinrib and Thomas Carannante here on the Yanks Go Yard podcast, joined today by Andy Martino, who you certainly know from SNY. His book, The Yankee Way, about the Brian Cashman era, an inside look we didn't think most people could get about the era, drops on May 21st. Andy, we really appreciate you joining us to hopefully shed some more light on somebody whose work we are obviously obsessed with in the day-to-day.
Understandable. Plenty of people are passionate about this team, maybe more so than any other. I can't scientifically prove that, but certainly you could make an argument the Yankees have the biggest, most passionate fan base of any franchise in the world. So a lot of people care about what this man does.
Well, thanks for helping pull the curtain back a little bit. I think what I'm most curious about is you've already revealed some tidbits from the book and also just described the ways that you've gotten access and the way that it's changed your relationship with Brian Cashman. What will surprise Yankee fans most about Brian Cashman's tenure and process, even his mood after reading this book?
I think that's a really good question. A couple things spring to mind. I think that it might surprise Yankee fans how highly regarded Cashman is within the game, considering that people understandably get caught up in the day-to-day, which isn't always great, obviously. But there was a point where I was interviewing Billy Beane, and I said, "Do you think Brian Cashman's a future Hall of Famer?" And Beane actually got a little annoyed with me. He was like, "I cannot even believe you're asking that question. Brian, when you say that man's name, you should say future Hall of Famer with every sentence, basically as if you were talking about Max Scherzer or whatnot." And he says, "In fact, I would go on to say that he's the greatest executive in the history of sports." I said, "Really?" I said, "Why would you say that?" He said, "Well, if you look at the pressures he's under, if you look at the decades and decades of winning, if you look at the fact that he's never taken a year off or tried to rebuild or retool. I mean, there have been little steps back that they've taken, but certainly never tanking. In the way the Orioles and the Astros, for example, get to success, they've never allowed themselves to do that. So that kind of full-throated praise definitely contradicts in some ways the way that Cashman is talked about on a daily basis. And what's interesting too is I talked to Brian Sabean, who before he came back to work for Cashman. This interview happened before that. And he said the same thing. He said, Brian is the greatest executive in the history of the sport. And he didn't know that Beane had said it. So that might surprise some people who don't think of him that way. It might surprise some people. I know it's known that some tensions have existed between Cashman and Jeter and Cashman and Joe Torre and Cashman and A-Rod. The extent of those, in particular with Jeter and Torre, might surprise people. I had the story in there about how Cashman and Torre had their falling out, which I don't believe has been told before. It might surprise people to see this isn't a Cashman specific point because it's not his biography. It's really about the Yankees and the time that he was there. So not a Cashman point, but all this talk about analytics in kind of a simplified way. Is it well done or is it not well done? Is it too much? Is it not? There's some really nuanced stuff in there from Garrett Cole and Zach Britton and some others about the good and the bad. And it will not surprise fans to hear that the clubhouse was up in arms about the Davy Garcia J-Happ opener game. That was not a shocker to reveal, but I've got Britton saying people were going, "We're the fucking Yankees. What are we doing?" Like within the clubhouse. So those are some things I would say, some surprises and not so surprises.
I'd say I would call those surprises and good tidbits. I mean, fans will. I think they'll be shocked to hear some of those things, and then they'll be validated to hear something about the opener because fans are dying for validation for some of the criticisms that have been outwardly spoken about over the last few years. But for you, Andy, this is a huge undertaking. Like you're an insider in the New York sports realm, and getting in the weeds with a book like this, and your interview subject being somebody who you have close connections with to break news is a big deal. So like, do you feel Cashman was trusting you more or less during this process? Has this affected your relationship with any other like employees in the Yankees organization?
I would say, was he trusting me more or less? Like, you mean more or less than other reporters, or more or less than he's trusted me in
That he's
other
trusted you
instances?
previously. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I would say that we have a respectful, like reporter subject relationship,
Yeah.
whether it's the Daily or whether it's this. I think he knows that I'm not someone who's out there to be either like a shill for him or be unnecessarily sensationalistic. I try to play it down the middle, and I think he trusts that when he tells me something, I don't want to speak for him, but I'd venture to say that when he tells me something, he knows it'll come out, it'll be written in a like grown up way that he meant it. So maybe there was some of that went into it. Over the course of the book, he definitely opened up more than he would in the day to day because there's strategy in the day to day. If I were to call him up, like we're recording this on a day, I know it's not airing today. We're recording this on a day where there were rumors about the Yankees and Dylan Cease yet again. So if I were to call him up right now, it wouldn't be like, hey, who are you offering? What are they offering? What I mean, he's got to be more guarded than that for strategy purposes. That's not our relationship. But if I said, take me inside trading David Wells for Roger Clemens, you give all the dirty details. So there's probably a level of trust there because of the time that's passed and some of the stuff. Although the book comes right up to the present day, and he talks openly at the very end of the book about his own future, and he trusted me with that. Another tidbit in there that might surprise people is that after the 22 season, when his contract was up, he got way closer to leaving than anyone, including Hal Steinbrenner, realized. A recruiter, a headhunter type, contacted him. He didn't do the outreach, but he answered, and they started talking like, hey, what would you do if you weren't doing this? And there was more of those kind of conversations. And when I asked Hal about it, he was like, I didn't think he was going to leave. And I was like, well, interestingly, he was thinking about it. So he trusted me with that. I'd like to think it's because he knows that I'll present it factually and without a spin one way or the other. Maybe he'll read it and wish he hadn't. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I'd like to think I presented it responsibly in the spirit it was told to me. Maybe he sees that I'm the kind of person that does that. I don't know.
This is so eye-opening, and that history versus modern day thing that you're describing definitely also sounds like the way I've heard Bill Belichick described recently.
Sure.
So not for nothing, but it is eye-opening to me even to hear you say like, hey, you might keep current stuff safeguarded a little bit, but you want him to open up on the last 20 years of Yankees history, he'll certainly go for it, which leads me into this thought that this offseason, there was this chatter about an audit, about sort of an internal process audit. And fans never really knew how far that went, how far it was ever intended to go. But as someone who's talked with Brian Cashman about 20 plus years of processes and is now hearing Steinbrenner and Cashman both at least tangentially talk about making sweeping internal changes that might be more subtle to the naked eye. Do you feel like that kind of revolution was necessary for things to get back on track, or if it was just sort of something you have to say, whereas they continue to trust this process that you've detailed in the book?
So that was a weird one, that so-called audit, because it never happened and it never was going to happen. And that was something that I eventually got to figuring out in my daily coverage, actually, like, because like, wait a minute, what audit? Who are they? What's this? Who's coming in? What are they doing? And finally I was told like, no, nobody's coming in. And I don't know where that started. Nobody like I had to go back and research this at the time to write the news story. And no one from the Yankees ever said that there were articles written about changes and things like that. And Hal Steinbrenner did make one comment. I don't remember the verbatim offhand, but it was like, we're going to take a look at everything, including the analytics. And maybe that misled people a little bit. But then I don't know. This thing took on a life of its own that the Yankees are being audited. And are they going to audit the trainers? Are they going to audit the analytics guys? Are they going to audit the coaches? The only thing that happened there was that Michael Fishman and David Grabner, who are two of their main analytics guys, for years have been wanting to hire this outside firm. Not even hire. What you do is you look at the way this firm does analytics and you compare it to the way you do analytics, and you look for similarities and differences and ways you can tighten it up. That's it. So no one's ever looked at the Yankees in an audit type way from the outside, and no one was ever going to. That finally got cleared up. I mean, I wrote about it, and then Cashman finally, I think he said it at the winter meetings, like publicly, I don't know what this is, what you all are talking about, but there's no audit. That's a paraphrase, not a direct quote, of course. But yeah, no, he doesn't believe it's necessary. In fact, he believes that their operation is pretty fucking good, if you remember that quote. And that was, I was there for all 67 minutes of that. And it's I got it in the book as one of the last scenes, because that was an example of he's sick of hearing that this thing is completely broken when he believes that they are starving for a championship, but their process and their people, he's proud of. So the perception that there needed to be an audit was probably part of what animated that rant. And he's feeling defensive on behalf of the Michael Fishmans and the Tim Nearings, who's his top scout, and people like that who were being told through fans and through some media that they're horrible, when Cashman's like, I've got good people and I'm sick of hearing them and me put down. So that's kind of where that came from. It was in that whole time where the audit was a bit of a topic, even though it wasn't real. It was a weird one.
That's all about coming up here